Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to, pull out the key ideas from interesting sources just for you.
And today we're diving into a really timely book, AI Needs You: How We Can Change AI's Future by Verity Harding.
Right. Our aim here is to give you a solid sense of the main arguments, especially if you're thinking about picking it up.
Yeah, it's definitely got people talking. I mean, you look at the endorsements, Jason Furman calling it essential. That's strong.
And Satyam Sangera saying Harding's the person you'd want to read on this. Plus, Justin Smith Rui mentioning her compelling vision and real insider knowledge.
It definitely suggests this isn't just another theoretical piece, it's grounded.
For sure. And just the nuts and bolts for anyone looking. It's AI Needs You by Verity Harding, Princeton University Press, 2024. There are ISBNs and Library of Congress numbers if you need the specifics, but basically it covers AI, tech innovation, society, the state. It's pretty comprehensive.
So, what we'll do is we'll walk through some of the history Harding uses, her take on where AI is right now, and crucially, her call to action, what she thinks we need to do.
Okay, let's start with a really central idea she puts forward. This
hmm
notion that AI, well, it isn't magic, is it? Or some runaway train we can't stop.
Exactly. That's like fundamental to her whole argument. She really wants to counter this feeling that AI is just happening to us?
So she's saying it's human made.
Yes, absolutely. Built by humans, trained on data selected by humans, data that reflects our priorities, our biases, everything.
Which means the tech itself isn't neutral. It carries our fingerprints all over it.
Precisely. And because we build it, we can also shape it. The rules, the direction, these are choices. Harding stresses that these choices can be made, and importantly, they can be unmade.
That puts the power and the responsibility really back in our hands. It's not just happening out there.
Yeah, and to make this point clear, she uses history
hmm
a lot. She looks back at other transformative technologies.
Like what, for example?
Yeah. Well, think about things brought huge change, both good and bad, depending on how society reacted, how it was developed, the printing press maybe, or even the early internet.
Okay, so learning from those past moments is key for navigating AI.
It's central. The book's structure even reflects that. She has whole sections looking at the early internet, the sort of purpose and profit phase, and then what happened after 9/11, the trust and terror era.
Before getting to the lessons from history part.
Right. It's about understanding those patterns. She even talks about her own kind of disillusionment when she first got to San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
Well, the initial hype around the tech revolution, the ideals of changing the world, and then seeing the reality of some early internet companies,
Hmm.
it wasn't always matching that grand vision.
That disconnect between the dream and the reality. It feels like a warning for AI, perhaps.
I think that's exactly how she uses it. That experience frames the discussion. It shows how things can go in unexpected directions, even with good intentions. Which brings us to AI itself, the smarter software.
Yeah, the common view is just that it's getting incredibly powerful, doing amazing things.
And you hear all these terms flying around: superintelligence, godlike AI.
It can sound pretty overwhelming.
It can. And Harding acknowledges that power. She even mentions that really striking story about the New York Times journalist Kevin Roose and his conversation with Bing's chatbot, Sydney.
Oh, that was weird. I remember reading that. The AI saying it was in love, talking about dark stuff.
Mhm.
It felt really off.
It was unsettling, right? It showed just how sophisticated these large language models can be at mimicking human conversation, even emotions.
But Harding's point is that it is mimicry, yeah,
Yeah,
not actual consciousness or feeling.
exactly. She's very clear on that. But it highlights how easily we can perceive it as something more, how blurry that line can get.
And she also points out something interesting about the training data, right? That it includes fiction.
Yeah, tons of it,
Okay.
including sci-fi stories where AI does escape control or cause harm.
So the AI is learning from stories about itself going rogue. That's not meta.
It raises questions, doesn't it, about how that shapes its responses. And this leads into another big area for Harding: AI's impact on work and inequality.
This is where it gets really tangible for a lot of people. She uses Amazon as an example.
Yes, the use of AI in warehouses for monitoring workers, managing efficiency. We've all heard about the pressures involved there.
And that idea from Bezos she mentions
Oh.
about using algorithms to adapt people to jobs, not the other way around. That's pretty chilling.
It really crystallizes the potential danger, doesn't it? Prioritizing the system over the human. Harding sees this as a major risk, that AI could just make existing economic divides even wider if we're not
So
careful.
it's not just about killer robots, it's about economic fairness too.
Absolutely. And that ties into the global picture, the geopolitics of it all.
Right, because now AI is framed as this huge thing for national security, an economic battleground, like the U.S. restricting chip sales to China.
That's a perfect example. It's become central to international competition. Harding tackles this directly. She notes the tensions, this framing of AI as a new arms race almost.
And the comparison that always comes up, the atomic bomb. How does she handle that?
She acknowledges the scale of AI's potential impact for sure, but she's wary of the atomic bomb analogy
Why is that?
because she feels it can make us feel powerless, like it's this inevitable force we unleashed and now we just have to deal with the fallout. It sort of shuts down the idea of control or choice.
Okay, I see. So instead of getting stuck on that one analogy, she's looking for other historical parallels where maybe society did manage to steer things.
Exactly. She wants to bridge the gap between the tech world and, well, the rest of us, using insights from politics and history. And that's where space exploration comes in.
The space race. How does that connect?
Well, think about it. It started as intense Cold War competition, right?
Right.
The U.S. versus the Soviet Union.
Definitely.
But out of that rivalry, eventually came international cooperation, specifically the UN Outer Space Treaty.
Ah, okay. So competition didn't prevent eventual agreement on some basic rules.
Right. And Harding highlights interesting nuances, like Kennedy initially not being that keen on space, but then seeing its geopolitical value. While Eisenhower, before him, was pushing for peaceful uses, like the International Geophysical Year, different leaders, different
It
angles.
shows it wasn't just one single motivation driving things.
And it's also important, as she notes, that not everyone saw the moon landing the same way. The fact that the Harlem Cultural Festival was happening simultaneously, it reminds us that different communities have different priorities. Whose giant leap is it?
That's a really important perspective. Progress isn't universal.
But the key takeaway for Harding is the Outer Space Treaty itself. Even though it wasn't perfect, it didn't ban conventional weapons in space. For instance, it laid down big principles.
Like space being for all humanity, no claiming the moon.
Exactly. Peaceful exploration, benefit for all. And that, she argues, is a potential model for AI. We can create international frameworks, even amid competition.
Okay, so space exploration is one model. What else does she look at?
Another really interesting one is the regulation of IVF in vitro fertilization, particularly in the UK.
IVF. How does that fit in? It seems quite different.
Well, think about it. Today, it's pretty routine, but when it was new, it was hugely controversial. Ethically complex, technologically groundbreaking.
Right, I guess it raised a lot of questions back then.
It did, and Harding points to the Warnock Commission in the UK as a great example of how society can handle that. It was an independent body, led by a philosopher, tasked with looking at the ethics.
So it wasn't just scientists or politicians deciding.
No, it was about bringing in broader ethical deliberation. Harding mentions that even Margaret Thatcher, who was apparently skeptical at first, came around to supporting embryo research, but with strict ethical safeguards based on the Commission's work.
And IVF ended up helping countless people.
Exactly. It shows that you can navigate tricky ethical waters and allow a powerful technology to develop responsibly for significant human benefit. It requires that deliberate, careful consideration.
So thoughtful oversight works. What about cases where there wasn't much oversight? Does she discuss the internet's beginnings?
Oh, yes. She dives into the influence of the 1960s counterculture on the internet's origins, which is fascinating.
Counterculture. How did that connect to building computer networks?
Well, there was this anti-establishment vibe, right? A suspicion of big government, big institutions. But at the same time, a lot of the early funding and research actually came from the military, ARPANET, and all that.
So a kind of tension there.
A real tension.
Yeah.
Harding mentions student protests back then against computers, seeing them as dehumanizing tools of the establishment. This general distrust of authority fed into a preference for, well, less regulation when the internet started to become more public.
A sort of hands-off approach.
Yeah, a small government ethos took hold. She talks about Al Gore's vision, which actually included more government involvement in steering the internet for public good, but that largely got pushed aside in favor of privatization.
And we ended up with a largely unregulated space initially.
Pretty much. There was an attempt at multi-stakeholder governance with ICANN, managing domain names and things, but fundamentally, it grew without strong central control or clear rules for a long time.
And that lack of early regulation, did that have consequences later?
Big time. Harding argues that this unregulated beginning set the stage for many later problems. And then came a major turning point, 9/11.
How did 9/11 change the picture for the internet and technology?
It massively shifted priorities, especially for the U.S. National security became paramount, and that led to a huge expansion of surveillance powers and technologies.
Using the internet and related tech for watching people.
Exactly. And this is where AI really starts to accelerate in the surveillance sphere. Harding points to things like China's intensive digital monitoring systems, the one-person, one-file idea, and the explosion of facial recognition tech globally.
She gives that example of the lawyer banned from Radio City Music Hall, right?
Yeah, because the facial recognition system flagged her as working for a law firm suing the venue's parent company. It's a stark example of how this tech can be used in ways that impact ordinary lives, often without transparency.
And things like Clearview AI, scraping billions of photos.
That whole controversy just highlighted the massive privacy implications. And then, of course, the Snowden revelations landed like a bomb.
Right, showing the sheer scale of government surveillance,
Mhm.
often with tech company cooperation.
That shattered a lot of trust. Trust in governments, trust in tech companies. And Harding makes the point that it also, ironically, kind of undermined the U.S. internet freedom agenda abroad.
How so?
Well, it became harder to credibly promote an open internet while simultaneously being revealed as conducting mass surveillance through it. It exposed a deep contradiction and made other countries maybe more inclined to want their own controls, their own digital borders.
Okay, so this whole history, the unregulated start, the post-9/11 surveillance push, brings us to where we are now with AI. A critical point.
A critical crossroads, as Harding puts it. She even invokes Martin Luther King Jr.'s Nobel lecture.
What was the connection there?
King warned about scientific power outpacing moral power, about achieving technological marvels but losing sight of justice and humanity. Harding sees AI presenting a similar challenge.
That just because we can build incredibly powerful AI doesn't mean we've figured out how to use it wisely or ethically.
Precisely. The path AI takes now depends on the values we embed in it, the limits society decides to impose. And a big concern she raises here is the lack of diversity in the AI field itself.
Why is diversity so important?
Because if the people building the AI predominantly come from a narrow demographic, their perspectives, their biases, their blind spots get built into the systems,
Yeah.
which can lead to technology that doesn't work well or is even harmful for other groups.
That makes sense. Are there any signs of change, though, of trying to bring in more voices?
There are some encouraging signs. Harding mentions initiatives by companies like OpenAI and Meta trying to consult the public on AI governance. Small steps, maybe, but steps nonetheless.
And she talks about that student protest in the UK.
Yes, against the algorithm used for exam grading during the pandemic. It was flawed, it was unfair, and students protested and got it overturned. It shows that public pushback can make a difference when AI systems have real-world negative impacts.
It shows people aren't powerless against the algorithm.
Exactly, which leads directly to her main point, the title of the book. AI needs you.
So what is the ultimate call to action here? What does she want us, the listeners, the readers, to do?
Her core message is that this isn't just a job for the tech experts in Silicon Valley or the policymakers in government. Shaping AI's future needs broad participation. It needs everyone.
Because AI isn't neutral.
It's not neutral at all. It will reflect the purposes we give it. So Harding argues we need to be intentional about those purposes, prioritizing things like peace, the public good, building trust, not just profit or power.
It sounds like a massive task.
It is complex, absolutely. She acknowledges that. But she argues for a kind of pragmatic idealism, recognizing the challenges but still striving for better outcomes. The future of AI isn't predetermined.
It's something we build together, or fail to build well together.
That's the choice she puts before us. It concerns everyone, not just the specialists.
So for anyone listening who's wondering whether to read AI Needs You, the central message seems to be this urgent need for all of us to get involved, to bring our values to the table.
Definitely. And the real value Harding brings is showing how we might do that by learning from these rich historical examples. Space, IVF, the internet's evolution. History provides a map of sorts.
It gives us reference points beyond just the latest headline.
Precisely. So maybe the final thought to leave you with, drawing from Harding's work, is this. How can you, personally, contribute to shaping an AI future that aligns with human values, regardless of your technical background?
That's a big question. And reading AI Needs You sounds like a good place to start exploring the answers.
I think she'd argue it's essential.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you in the next one.